Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Pamplin, you mentioned earlier to me before this hearing how long you'd been working on this issue around salmon management and pinniped predation. Remind me how long that was?
Madam Chair, through the chair, I should say, Congresswoman Randall, we have been engaged in pinniped investigations as an agency going back decades. I personally have been engaged on this issue for about 25 years.
Thank you so much. It was impressive to me, and I felt like it was important to bring up here before the committee, before launching into some questions. And I know you touched on this a little bit in your original testimony, but can you explain a little bit more about the impact of unchecked pinniped predation on salmon from the Department of Fish and Wildlife's perspective?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, I really want to call out those three areas. The study that NIMS did in the Lower Columbia, where 20 to 44% of the upriver spring Chinook run was being consumed. This is a vulnerable life stage at this point. These are adult returning salmon that are going to spawn, and here they are. They didn't have a chance. And when you think about where the pinniped populations levels are and how depleted salmon are, that's, I think, a pretty striking example. Also, I would note that the steelhead study in the Nisqually were upwards of 33% of outmigrating smolts.
That's a huge impact on our keystone populations in the state that are essential to our economy, to tribal fishing rights, and to a community that relies on fish and is so grateful to have it as one of our beautiful exports, and a salmon that we're able to harvest and enjoy as part of the living in Washington State. Being able to rely on the science that you mentioned is so important to a good co-management. Would you agree that a lack of flexibility to conduct science-based predator management in order to reduce pinniped predation at hotspots in Washington hinders our ability to recover salmon? I think we sometimes our neighbors are overwhelmed by how cute salmon or a sea lion or a seal is, and we have to follow the science, and being able to do so without inflexibility is important. Can you tell us any more about that science?
Through the chair, thanks for the question, Congresswoman. Yes, and I think it's really important. I want to characterize this as not something that is going to just be, sometimes I hear from the opponents, is going to be like a rampant, or widespread cull. This would be a very focused removal. And the bill has ceilings on the number of pinnipeds that can be removed. There's a potential biological removal under the MMPA, and there's a cap of 10%. And even there, for instance, for California sea lions or stellar sea lions, I don't see us approaching that cap. It's just nice to have, I think, through the optics and making the bill political viable to have those ceilings in place. But the science on where predation is occurring, a lot of times harbor seals are, for instance, generalists. They eat all kinds of prey. But when they move into the rivers where they're spawning habitat of salmon, we kind of know what they're doing there. And that's where having that ability to do those removals on harbor seals, California sea lions, and stellar sea lions in those areas makes sense to us.
Absolutely. And something that's, I think, very important for us to touch on here is the Department of Fish and Wildlife's partnership with tribal and federal partners to do this active management work. Can you tell us a little bit more about the co-management resources and your partnership with treaty tribes in Washington State?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, there's actually a state law that every state agency has a tribal liaison, and we certainly have one. But we also have the expectation that our staff, whether they're executives to senior managers, wildlife area managers, hatchery specialists, field biologists, we are integrated with the tribes in Washington. This is not something where we have just an annual meeting with tribes. It's daily, weekly, dozens of meetings with tribes across our staff. And we work with tribes on all aspects of salmon recovery, whether it's working on hydropower relicensing and trying to make sure that fish passage is good, to habitat restoration works, to coordinating harvest and hatchery frameworks. It's very integrated. What this bill does is actually allow for treaty tribes in Western Washington to engage with us. Right now, they don't have the authority under Section 109, and they don't have the authority under Section 120. This bill provides authority under Section 120 with a new 120K.
Thank you so much. And my time has expired, but Madam Chair, I'd like to submit some letters in support, a unanimous consent request, letters of support from Washington Hatchery Coalition, Puget Sound Anglers, and the Ilwaco Charter Association.
Without objection, so ordered. And I also would like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from the American Sports Fishing Association, the minority witness from our December hearing supporting H.R. 9621, H.R. 8876, and H.R. 7332. Without objection, so ordered.
The expert appearing before the committee explained that he has personally worked on pinniped investigations for roughly 25 years, while the agency has studied the issue for decades. That history gives some context to the testimony, because this is not a debate that suddenly appeared overnight. Researchers and wildlife managers have been studying the relationship between salmon and pinnipeds for a long time.